Hello all and welcome back. Today I had the idea, if I was in James Gunn position and I had to reboot the DC cinematic universe, how I would go about that in the correct way in a hard reboot, not playing favorites. Also, I would have, while laying out this plan and getting writers and directors and actors, let Zack Snyder finish off the DCEU, aka Snyderverse, in another 4-hour Justice League movie, hoping he'd adapt the original storyboards for his sequels as they sounded epic, and that doesn't alienate those fans. Anyways, on to where I would start. Like Snyder and Gunn have, I would start with a Superman movie, just titled Superman. It would be an origin movie for Superman, along with Lois Lane and Lex Luthor, who would become the main villain, with side villains of Ultrahumanite and the Toyman, ending with Superman with Lois and the Daily Planet staff help battling Lex Luthor, who would be in his war suit, and defeating him and preventing Lex from causing World War III, as he would be able to profit off it with LexCorp technology. If this video does well, I could always make a separate video breaking down how I would do this movie. It would end with Superman victorious and Lex Luthor not in jail, but taking a hit to his reputation. Brainiac would also cameo to set him up as this first chapter's big bad. Then on to the second project, which would be later that year. I would do a gritty Daredevil-like Batman series with his origin and early days as Batman, working with Detective Gordon against the corrupt GCPD and the mob. He would encounter his very early villains, such as the Joker, who would start off as the Red Hood and develop with his origin being ambiguous, along with villains like Dr. Death, reimagined as a serial killer, the Mad Monk, reimagined as a PDF cult leader, Hugo Strange, similar to the comics, and the Penguin, who would be the corrupt mayor, would be introduced in the latter half of the series. An episode dedicated to Selina Kyle becoming Catwoman, and a finale where Batman would defeat the Joker and Detective Gordon would become Commissioner, ousting the corrupt Commissioner Loeb. A cross between the Daredevil and Gotham series, pretty much. Then, the last project of the first year would be a web-animated series of shorts, simply titled Justice, to flesh out the universe, showing the first superhero team during World War I and II being the Justice Society, which would go on to inspire the Justice League down the line. There would be scenes set in the present where characters from the movies and series would reprise their voice roles to connect it together, like Clark Kent and Lois Lane looking into the Justice Society. On to the second year, and the second movie of the universe would be a Wonder Woman movie set in the present, with her origin on being on Paradise Island, meeting Steve Trevor, who would be an agent of Argus, and his boss, Amanda Waller, and battling Seer, who are run by the Amazon's enemy and main villain Ares, the god of war, with Paula von Gunther and Dr. Poison as side villains. I want the movies in this universe to be big, 2-hour-plus epics, which, like Superman, this would be. Wonder Woman with Argus would bring down Seer, who would attempt to attack Paradise Island. The villain's killed. Cheetah is introduced, and her origin happens, setting her up for sequels, and there be a lot of Greek god mythology stuff fleshed out. Then another movie later that year being Green Lantern. It would be a cosmic-based story, and not a grounded Middle America take that the DCU for some reason is doing. Hal Jordan would be the Green Lantern, his origin shown, his romance with Carol Ferris. Jon Stewart would be a supporting character along with the Green Lantern Corps. Sinestro would be the main villain along with the Manhunters, but Sinestro would start off as Hal's mentor and reveal his true intentions later in the movie, with Hector Hammond and Atrocitus being side villains. The movie would end with Green Lantern defeat Sinestro, causing him to go into the anti-matter universe, setting up a sequel with the Sinestro, aka Yellow Lantern Corps. End of the year, a live-action Flash series, as I think he works well in TV format, proven by the Arrowverse. Flash in the series would have his origin, and it would be very sci-fi based, with him facing off with his first villain, the Turtle, and moving on to the main villains of the series being the Rogues, led by Captain Cold, and we would get the origin of Gorilla Grodd to set him up for the second series, and also Reverse Flash would appear to set him up. Barry Allen, like in the comics, would be a CSI working with the CCPD, as well as love interest Iris West, a reporter. And the majority of the episodes would start with Barry at a crime scene. The series would end with the Flash defeating Captain Cold and the Rogues and saving Central City. Then the third year and last year of this first new chapter, which would start with a second series of Justice, and I'd have Martian Manhunter, a big part of it, who would at least cameo in all the movies to link them together. Then we would get the fourth movie, and our first sequel in the universe being to Superman. I'd call it something like Superman, followed by a subtitle like The Man of Steel, or Tomorrow, or Last Son of Kryton, or something. In this movie, Superman would take on Lex Luthor once again, along with Bizarro and Metallo, with Brainiac having a larger presence. Superman and Lois would grow close. Lex would begin an anti-metahuman political campaign, and the movie would end with Superman and Lex forced to work together to defeat a rampaging Bizarro, who Lex kills and uses this to be elected President of the United States, with Brainiac having a major influence. Superman, despite this, and now being polarized, would keep strong and reveal his identity to Lois, and the events of this movie lead into this chapter's climax movie. Then, later that year, a second series of Batman, based a lot off the Long Halloween comic, with Joker, Catwoman, and Penguin returning, and Batman spending the series working with Commissioner Gordon and DA Harvey Dent to find a Batman copycat who is also the Holiday Killer, who kills mobsters as Gotham 5 families like the Falcones and Maronis are at war. Scarecrow would be introduced. Harvey Dent would become Two-Face towards the climax. The Batman copycat, aka Holiday Killer, would be Hugo Strange manipulated and controlled by both Harvey Dent's wife Gilda and Alberto Falcone, who is Don Falcone's son, who is revealed to be adopted and real name Edward Nygma, setting him up as the Riddler for the next series. By the end of the series, Batman and Commissioner Gordon, with Catwoman, would stop the villains. Hugo Strange the Killer would die, and the heads of the 5 families would be dead, plunging Gotham into chaos. Then, the final project of the year and the first chapter would be a Justice League epic movie. The roster would be who you expect: Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Flash, joined by Aquaman, who would be introduced in the Justice Animated series, and Martian Manhunter, as they battle villains. President Lex Luthor, who sends troops after all metahumans manipulated by the big bad Brainiac, who controls the villain Starro and uses it in the climax. It would be Superman, with Martian Manhunter's help, who would bring the team together as Superman would encounter Batman early on, and they would have a fight because we love to see it. Green Lantern and Flash would separately encounter each other and become good friends. Wonder Woman would encounter and fight Aquaman, who despite both the Atlanteans and Amazons hating each other, would put differences aside. Brainiac would use the evil influence of President Luthor to subjugate the human race to collect them, but when that fails, and the Justice League with reporters like Lois Lane and Iris West expose Lex, then Brainiac would unleash Starro to force the human race to bend to his will. At the climax in Washington, D.C., the 7 Justice League members would fight and destroy Starro. Brainiac, who's a monstrous machine like CGI alien, would possess Lex Luthor in a new war suit, turning his skin green like the classic Brainiac design from the comics, and the Justice League would defeat him, and both the Lex and Brainiac hybrid would die, and the heroes would discover Brainiac's true motive was he raising an army to fight a threat outside of this universe, which would be set up for new big bad Darkseid and the New Gods for a follow-up chapter. Also, this would be the end of this Earth's Lex Luthor, but a Earth 3 one would be introduced later on and serve as the new Lex Luthor, and creating the Injustice League, or Legion of Doom, later on. Finally, the 7 Justice League heroes would stand tall, honored by a new president in front of the Capitol building. And that would be what I think a better, more conventional way of rebooting DC, with a first chapter that is connected and builds to an awesome climax while having the project stand alone. I took a lot of influence from the great first phase of the MCU, which was focused on the main Avengers heroes building to the climatic team-up movie. Whereas the DCU, just like the latter day of the DCEU, things seem scattered, inconsistent, and disconnected and not building to anything. At least the first 5 projects in the DCEU, despite Justice League 2017 being a major disappointment, felt connected, building up to Justice League, even if they were rushing to it. I am not impressed with the DCU so far, and James Gunn really needs to turn things around or he'll be out when his contract ends. Superman, despite being a decent movie, I don't think was a good way to introduce a universe, as I felt like we were just dropped in the middle of it. And Superman is meant to, like Iron Man, being the anchor of the universe. But this version felt like a impulsive, weak man-child, only acting like Superman in the climax. Man of Steel was a much better start, as it felt like a natural Superman solo movie from start to finish. And that Superman, despite it being his first days on the job, felt like the strong Superman through and through. And then, when he finally returned back from the dead in Zack Snyder's Justice League, easily the superior version, which the movie built to, it was awesome, and he turned the tide of the final battle. The only project I have any excitement for is his Man of Tomorrow movie, as I enjoyed Superman and like the idea of a movie of Superman and Lex Luthor teaming up to battle Brainiac with other heroes. Thanks for tuning in. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, this is the Easy Nerd, signing off.